Everything from clothing to household items are getting more expensive each day. The world of fast fashion has complicated clothing production by outsourcing around the world to whoever can sew them the cheapest. And now you, the consumer, are paying the price with rising costs. American Giant is about keeping things simple and close to home. They aren't affected by tariffs because their products never leave the U.S. So when you buy from American Giant, you're taking a stand for hardworking people, local communities, and quality clothes. American Giant directly supports American manufacturers and ensures you aren't footing that tariff bill. Support American-made, tariff-free clothing with American Giant. Get 20% off your first order when you use promo code STAPLE20 at american-giant.com. That's 20% off when you use code STAPLE20 at american-giant.com.
Stop right there. Yeah, you. If you like all things entertainment, current events, or Hollywood, then look no further. Creator to Creators, hosted by director Meosha of Horror Noir, interviews filmmakers and creatives from around the world. Join in on the fun, guest celebrities, and informative information to have as a creator. Hit subscribe and stay connected to Creator to Creators.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Creators to Creators Today we have a special guest.
My name is Sherri Chung.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I love going back to the beginning. I always say the beginning kind of charts our almost like our trajectory, where we're going in life, a little habits that we pick up along the way, kind of as we're children. They follow us as in our adulthood. Tell me a little bit about your childhood. What was that like? And how did you find your way into doing the things that you're doing now?
Yeah, so I was always a musical kid. I grew up, actually, I'm a classically trained pianist, and I was one of those kids that wanted to play the piano. I wanted to be immersed in music. I wanted to do the classical thing. I just thought, this is totally for me. And so, I think most parents at that, when their kids are that age, are like, okay, all right, well, we'll try out, but they don't want to invest too much because obviously private lessons for anything is a very, is expensive. But
Yeah.
luckily I had very supportive parents. And so they believed me, they trusted me, and I practiced a lot and did all the things. And so, but so I did a bunch of performances, classical performances in church, in school, just recitals, that kind of thing. And then I kind of realized I actually had one really bad performance.
Oh no.
I'd won this piano competition, and part of the prize, if you will, was to perform again, your winning piece into the, with hundreds of people, and they had cameras, and it wasn't like necessarily televised, but there was cameras, and I just blanked. There were so many new components and things coming at me that I just blanked, and I started over. I flubbed my way through it. I got through it, and I left the stage in tears.
Oh.
But the truth is it's actually really more about it just made it's not even so much that performance. It was almost like that just was another example of how I realized that the performance aspect was secondary to me, but I was more creative. I wanted to be more creative with my music, and it was around that time. I mean, I was kind of always writing songs and using my voice as another instrument. I don't think I was really writing lyrics or anything good at that point. But I was definitely, very, just trying to be creative and trying to find my own voice and my own, how my hands and my voice will work together on a piano, and just in that kind of creation, that artist child that all of us have. But yeah, like I said, I was very, very, very fortunate to have parents who were very supportive of that. And then
That's
around
good.
maybe when I was like 12 or 13, I saw Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Ooh.
A little bit late, a latecomer to it, but it had this beautiful, just really sensational score by Michael Kamen, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. And I'd seen movies before
Wow.
and heard scores, but I just had never been moved and touched by a score
Oh.
that much. And so from that moment on, I'm like, I want to do what this guy Michael Kamen is doing. I want to write music for film and television, and that was the bug. I caught
That
the
was
bug.
the
That was the moment.
Yeah. I love that. That's beautiful. So you get you know what you want, and what's next? How do you find your way to, like, it's like, okay, we have that thing. So like, how do we get there? That part, like, what's next? What do you do next?
Yeah, I mean, and you bring up a good point. I think knowing what you want is one of the
Yeah.
hardest things that any of us, and that's a lifelong journey, right? I mean, you can
Yeah.
say what you want at any stage. When by the time you get there,
Hmm.
you realize, why am I not happy? Oh, right, because what I want has actually changed. And so,
Yes.
really good point. But it is true. I did know what I wanted, but like I said, I'm in my like pre-teens, early teens,
Right.
and there's no, and I, just to not to sound curmudgeonly, but back in my day, we didn't have the internet wasn't then what it is now, and so there was no way I couldn't like Google search or go on.
Hmm.
We didn't have GarageBand. We didn't have any of those things, or maybe what we did have, I just didn't really have easy access to it, and
Yeah.
so I just continued studying piano and just continued. I did continue to study music composition in a very formal training sense. So I went on and got my undergrad in composition and theory, and then
Awesome.
eventually I came out to Los Angeles, to University of Southern California, to do their graduate program in specifically scoring for motion picture and television. I mean, and I that's an easy way to just sum up the road, but I suppose a lot of us, it was kind of a long road to get there. If for anything,
Hmm.
I had to grow up a bit, and I had to go to further schooling. But I always stayed involved with music and classical piano and writing songs. And then I was able to have songs of mine performed in school or at church or something. So I definitely explored the creative route. I didn't really start to explore actual scoring for like to picture
Uh-huh.
until, gosh, like probably in my college,
Uh-huh.
my undergrad years. So it was a while before I could really get to that point. I think, like I said, I think had I grown up in a different time or had the internet been, what it is today, I probably
Uh-huh.
would have tried my hand at scoring more things. But we use what we have in the moment, and I think it worked out. So
I honestly think it's better. Well, I, I think I have a love-hate relationship with social media and just and like, like, I just feel like nowadays everyone's so disconnected because of it, and everyone's on their phones, and there's no really connection anymore. So
it's so true.
yeah.
It's very, very true. I'm with you. It's a love hate. It's like we all feel the need to kind of do it because that's how the world
Yeah.
is connecting, and that's how people
Yeah.
are able to self promote. And self promotion is, I mean, this being a film composer is not glamorous. It is a hustle for the rest of my career. It's always going to be a
Wow.
because we have self.
Wow.
Yeah. So but I'm with you on that. But then social media is very, yeah, it's difficult.
Right? It's like you have to post. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't have any more photos to post. So it's like all you're in your head, and your agent's like, you need to do this, you need to do that. It's just a lot. So, but you have to love it. So I think that's the thing. It's like, if you love what you do, right? It's like, it's not work, but it's a fun hustle.
Absolutely. I mean, you're totally right, and I think any artist who's pursuing this career or any other sort of art career, I mean, even what you're doing, it's a constant hustle, and but that therein lies, I think, the where I especially have to remind myself that this is about the journey. It's about
Mm,
it can't be about the destination because we're
yeah.
not guaranteed the destinations, and we can say that about life, and and go into very existential types of things. But especially with this, it's like, my goal was to write music for film and television. And
Mhm.
when I talk to newer composers or composers who are newer on their journey, I remind them, I'm like, tell me what your goal is. And they'll say pretty much the same thing. I want to write, I want to make a living, make
Yeah.
write music for film and television. And some of them are doing it already. And I have to remind them, just like I remind myself, like, if that's my goal, I've already reached it. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But of course we realize, oh no, that's not the rest of the goal. That was
Right.
just the goal. And so, but it is about the journey, and it's true. You have to want it. You have to really want it and love it. You don't have to love all the aspects of it, but you have to
Hmm.
really find that creative fulfillment and that joy in there because, the industry is just, it's difficult. It's competitive, and it's cyclical, and there are days that you win and there are days that you are just not going to win. It's just It's just how it is. So you
Yeah.
have to really kind of love it and want it and love it for all of its ups and downs and its, uglies and pretties.
I love that. I love how you put that. That's so true. Have you experienced, and I don't know how it is in that world, but I can imagine as a woman, um, is it is it different than a man, like like a male compose are there differences? Are men dominating that field? Or is it very equal on both
Well,
ends?
historically, for sure, it is absolutely male dominated. And I think there's a couple reasons for that, but
Mhm.
I think that's changing. It's shifting. I think
That's good.
that the career of being a film composer, film and TV composer, I think that's a little bit more. It's getting more widely known
Hmm.
about, again, through social media and just press and the way that our world is becoming in some ways smaller and smaller because it's the age of information and you can find out
Yeah.
information and you come upon these career paths that most people never even knew was a job.
Yeah.
And I,
Right.
I think I knew it was a job for any reason because, I was musically in tune with even what it was to be a composer. As if anyone studies any classical composers, or even if you're studying, playing stuff in like mainstream or pop or rock or anything that you love, if you look, there's always a composer. There's always somebody who's written something, and so
Yeah.
that job has always been on my radar. But yeah,
Mhm.
in terms of the female versus male, it's still very much male dominated.
Hmm.
Um, and I know, some female composers that I have who've been in the business for a long time, kind of like I have, but in some even longer. They do have stories. They do have stories where they've been told, "Sorry, we don't actually think that a woman can do this action score, so we're not going to hire."
Yikes.
They've been told those things. That luckily that has not been a part of my journey.
That's
I,
great.
I've never been told to my face, or I've never heard that, oh, we don't think that she can do that because she, or because half Asian, or I don't know, biracial,
Yeah.
or anything like that. Um, I'm sure it's happened, but honestly, I think the industry is so much about the full person. You have
Yeah.
to be able to take a meeting well and run a room and have your creative ideas and really be able to express your ideas and be articulate. And that's a
Hmm.
skill that's male, female, like
Yeah.
gender. I mean, that has nothing to do with gender or race at all. So I do think that I do think that there are other, important factors that go into, the makeup of our industry and who's out there. But I,
Hmm.
I will say that, because I went to school for this, I went to school
Yeah.
both, as we talked about in my undergrad, as a composition in theory, as well as graduate specifically for the craft. And there were almost no, I was the only female or one of two females.
Wow.
Getting to school. Now, school is not the only way to get to do this. But even in my like matriculation, even in the curriculum, there were no, there
Yeah.
were no the other females. So I
Hmm.
was I didn't necessarily feel like I was blazing any sort of trail, but I was all amongst the guys, and I felt like very much their equal. I didn't feel,
That's
uh,
good.
if anything, I felt singled out in a good way. Like, oh wow,
Yeah.
look, there's is kind of the only one of their kind right now. What's
Yeah.
that? Like, hey, it works for me. It makes me stand out. It's
Yeah, I mean, and your resume is impeccable. The things that I mean, holy crap. I mean, we can't cover it in 30 minutes, but wow, wowza.
yeah.
You never let that define you and put you in boxes. How do you, like, is that something like that is that like, have you always possessed that, you know, nothing's going to stop you kind of, and you're just going to like blaze on, trailblaze through and continue to, like, whatever obstacle that comes your way, you just continue to figure it out.
I, I appreciate that, and I would love to say, oh yes, I never let anything stop me, and I scale every wall, and I just punch right through. And but I mean, I think we all do that, and then we all have
Yeah.
days where I'm just gonna lay down my sword. I can't get over this wall. I can't get
Yeah.
through. But I do think that I do feel very fortunate that going back to the very beginning of our conversation, I just knew what I wanted to do. And
Yeah.
I feel like if a person knows that, and they know that within their heart, and they know that, like I do, I can't if I'm going to find happiness at all in this world, it's going to be in this, it's going to be in this career. It's going to be in this,
Yeah.
it's going to be pursuing this art and this craft. And so for me, it's like, well, if we're all trying to pursue our own happiness in like our true, authentic place of where I live,
Yeah.
this is my only choice. So I don't feel brave, and I don't feel headstrong. I just know what I want,
I love
and
that.
I'm just gonna try and find a way to do it. But there are days when I feel like all of us. I feel stronger than others, and sometimes, and again, it's like feels like 5 steps forward and like,
Wow.
4 steps back, and just some days, like, so you feel on it, and other days it's a struggle. But I will say, yeah, if I have the clarity of knowing what I want, and I think if
Yeah.
anyone has that clarity, you can scale walls.
Oh yeah, for sure. 100%. Has there been like, what's your proudest? I can imagine because you have so many moments, I'm sure, in your career, but one of your proudest moments.
Oh wow, yeah. I will say that every project I have a proud moment when I feel like I crack the code.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, I figured it out, or this theme works. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And where I feel like that, something that I've created not only works for the project, but it really is hand in hand. It's elevating, if possible, if it, or it's really just doing its job. And I feel like those are very proud moments. I think that if I zoom out a bit, I
Uh-huh.
think, um, I've had a couple of standout projects that I have felt that I've grown as a composer. One of them was, Gremlins, Secrets of the Mogwai, which is an animated
Yeah.
that I did. That I just, it's one of those moments where I'm just so proud of my own personal growth as a composer,
Mm.
personal and professional growth as a craftsperson, and I
Yeah.
just grew so much from that project. And I don't think you can always choose those moments when I mean, there's good stretch marks, and then there's painful ones, like, oh, that's gonna leave a mark. And I feel like that was one where it was like, oh yeah, I was ready. I was ready to step into that project.
Hmm.
I was as equipped as I was ever going to be, and I feel like I rose to that challenge, and like I said, really discovered things about myself as a composer, like I can do that, or I am proud of myself. And these aren't ego trips per se. They're just personal victories, internal victories that I think every artist,
Yeah.
quietly struggles with. And we don't want to let other people know what our weak points are. We're always like, no, no, I've got this armor on and I'm very strong. But we all have those places, those quiet little places that no one talks about at parties, like
That's true.
everyone has them. And anyway, so that was one of those, moments where it was a very internal and a private joy that I think the musicians were able to share in, the musicians who worked with me on it, because they've seen my other projects, and they saw really how much I grew. And a lot of them even said as much, like I had just wow, and so
Wow.
it's a very personal, proud moment that keeps me going to the next one.
I love that. And I mean, you're award winning. Was that like, I mean, because on this journey, there's a lot of things, like there's people and things and projects that I get on, and it's just crazy when you think about like the rooms you get into and you're like, wow, that actually happened. Like that wasn't something that you set out, you know, that wasn't your intention. You're just loving what you do. And it's when you step out on faith, I think that just things just come along the way. I don't know how that, you know what I mean? Like it just aligns itself to your vision.
Absolutely, 100%. And I feel, and again, I love hearing you put it that way too, because I am constantly forgetting to look at that 360 image. I'm constantly forgetting
Mm.
to remind myself, I'm like, look at where you are. Like, look at how accomplished. I think some of us are I'm so focused on, but I'm
Same.
not there yet. I'm not there. I'm not there. And it's like, yeah, okay, but everything's a building block, right? It's like, and I remind myself and tell people too, like, I couldn't do now, what I'm doing now, even 3 years ago. I
Oh,
needed the stepping blocks of yesterday to get to today, to remind myself of where I've come, the strength that I have. I mean, it really is, very much a journey in that way. And I do think it's important to step back and to kind of zoom out a bit and remind ourselves, you know,
Hmm.
how far we've come.
Absolutely. I'm just so curious of what's your process like when you get something that comes to your desk, and like what's that like? How do you come up with all of that? Like you're so brilliant. Like I'm so curious.
I appreciate. You know what? There's a lot to be said for the motivating factor of fear. Like, there really is. I mean, I think I've talked to a lot of my compatriots in the business too, and we're like, oh yeah, the deadline is like the only way for me to get anything done, and it's true. It's the only way. But I think a lot of it is just, I get inspired by the story. I get inspired by what I
Mm,
see on the screen and
mhm,
and things and instincts. So I just kind of go on an instinct, and
mm.
it's hard because you put that first offer out there and you're just like, well, this is my thought. It's not my only thought. It's not my only direction. It's not my only way that I can go. But I think a lot of it is based on a choice. You have to make a choice and go with an instinct, and and in a good way, lean on someone else, my showrunner, my director, my producers, to tell me, yeah, that works, I love that,
Yeah.
and it's hard because obviously I believe in it before I present it. But when they tell you, I don't get it, I don't think the right tone at all,
Yeah,
it's
you're like,
yeah, I mean, no, I mean, it makes me question my whole existence in this world.
oh, oh,
Crushing. But I do think a lot of it is it's the job, and I think the job requires, I mean, that appeal, it's the creative part and the craft of it, and the craft part is just saying, I'm going with this is my idea, if you don't like
mhm,
it, let's talk about it, throw it out, I got a million more where that came from. And I
yeah,
think that it's just not being afraid to just say, this is my idea. I mean, because that's ultimately what I'm being hired for. I'm being hired for, to have a point of view, to have a voice. If you don't like my
mhm,
voice or my point of view, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Maybe I'm not the right person for your project, or let's have that conversation, because it's never a hole in one. Well, I don't know. I don't think we should ever aim for like that, because
yeah,
it's a collaborative process, and I'll tell you, when I read scripts and then I see the very final end of, like, after I've written the music and after now we're screening it,
yeah,
gosh, so many ways to get to that destination. So no one person on that project ever went beeline straight for the goal, and that it's a living, breathing organism, the stories
mm,
tell. And so I feel like I appreciate you saying that, but a lot of it is a very collaborative effort with the people who create the stories as well. And
yeah.
I feel as though I'm part of the writing team. I'm adding story through music, and you just got to go for it and be brave sometimes.
That's it, being brave. And just trusting that, I guess, that you're that guide, that it's the spirit within you, that it's leading you to where you need to be, and or where you want to go. I'm such a huge, like, I'm so big on like manifesting, and just putting an intention out there, and just like letting that come back, or just letting it out, let it go, and then it somehow it figures itself out.
I,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get better with that, to be honest, because there's so much, I'm like many of us artists, type A, we want to control, we want to influence.
Yeah.
I want more, influence over this, or power, over this thing, and or control over it. And we just don't
Mhm.
have that. But you're right. What we do have control over is putting that energy out there, and getting back to something that you said just a little bit earlier too, just the idea of just show up and believe that what's coming to you is meant for
Yeah.
you. What is
Yeah.
meant for you is coming to you. And if it's
Yeah.
not, if it doesn't come, if you don't get that job, it's really difficult. The rejection of it is really part of the success of it, because if you don't continue
Yes.
yourself out there, to possibly get rejected and to possibly get approval, you'll never get anywhere. But just having a good system of one's work in one's craft, having a good, positive outlook on, look, I'm being hired for a reason,
Mm.
or people want to hear what I have to say for a reason. It might not be the most novel thing, it might not be the most brilliant idea ever, but sometimes it needs to be an idea that works. And if you just keep showing up and doing the work, and there's a lot of luck involved. I don't tell
Yeah.
any there's a lot of luck and persistence, and just staying your ground and sticking with it. The timing of it will eventually fall into your favor in a certain way. And there's all kinds of work being done in the background, in the ether, in the universe that we don't even know about.
Yeah.
Things that are being put in place for me to meet that person later on, but I couldn't meet them any earlier because they weren't
Right.
ready. I wasn't. So it's just it's all this interconnected thing that I agree. Manifesting and staying positive.
Yeah, it's so, and I know it's just, it's, I always say this industry, well, the creative field is definitely not for everyone, because it's one of those things, like I think a lot of I was talking to someone recently, and um they were talking about they want to get into the business, and I was like, well, why do you want to get into the business? And they're like, oh, I want to be famous like Kim Kardashian. I'm just like, well, it's a journey. It's not like an overnight thing. It's not a microwave success. I think a lot of people have this thing of, yeah, I want it now, and it's like that doesn't happen that way. You just have to really want to do it, and whatever that is, and just keep at it for the rest of your life, really.
It's true. I mean, the thing that's a funny thing. It's like everyone wants it now. Nobody sits here and says, I want that for later. Like, no, we all say we want it now, but you're right. It's like how's the saying going? It's like an overnight success that took 10 years, or like I don't know. Everything does tend to look like an overnight success. But
Yeah.
but anyone who is at the top of their game, or just didn't start out that way. We all have to learn and grow, and
Hmm.
yeah, but it's true though. We all want it now. We're all patient.
But has there been moments of like that, I'm sure, like that, like you have this a problem, like you said, a deadline or something that, and it just wasn't coming. How do you, like, how, and still, how do you still make the deadline even if you're not sure how, what how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean it's a great question, and I think one of the ways that I don't miss a deadline is because I've always told myself, no matter what, you're going to act professional. The two things are,
Mm.
you're going to act professional in front of anyone else. Behind closed doors, you know whatever you want.
Yeah, you just lose it.
You can lose it all, and I do. But but you like always act professional
Yeah.
and never miss a deadline. Ever
Mm.
miss a deadline. So I mean, there's all kinds of ways. I think one of the big things is, reminding myself it doesn't have to be, and I've said this before, it doesn't have to be the best idea. It's got to
Hmm.
be an idea that works. And you're going
Yeah.
to have to go with your instincts and just make it in. And sometimes it's a square peg in a round hole, and you just shove that
Mm.
thing in there. It's going to work, damn it.
Yeah.
But other times it's like, you know what? All right, take a step back,
Yeah.
and sometimes I'll really zoom out and I'll listen to the other things that I've done on that
Oh,
show or on that movie. Like, just
nice.
listen to the other things that you felt were working, the other scenes, maybe other things that got approved, or other things that you're ready to present, and just to find and just kind of zoom out and let maybe that missing piece come to you by listening to the rest of the pieces around it.
Mm.
Because like a puzzle, it's the pieces all fit together to make one bigger picture. And so
Mm.
really, if I'm really having a hard time coming up with something, or if I'm really having a hard time making an idea work,
Hmm.
it could actually just be the wrong idea for this one
Mm.
session. And sometimes just putting my hands on the piano and just improvising.
I
Sometimes
love
getting
that.
away from the computer and going to the piano, like just
Yeah.
something that's acoustic, something that's analog, something that does not have a screen in front of it, and
Yeah.
improvising on the piano, like that's helpful. Also for me, movement is very helpful. Going for a
Mm.
walk, just stepping away from that computer, from wherever it is I'm actually writing, stepping away, and even like I don't know, take a shower, do a workout, like something. Sometimes the idea is like, oh, that's what I want to do, because sometimes it's
Yeah.
just the distraction of, I've got to perform, I've got to do it this way, it's got to be done, and it's like, just walk away for a minute. But
Yeah.
I will tell you, when you say that when I say, like, this is the deadline, there is no missing this deadline, then it becomes, something's got to get printed and something has to get delivered. And
Hmm.
so it's yeah, it's you won't miss it. But there And so all kinds of tricks and things. The creativity is a hard thing to call upon, and I think that's one of the hardest things about the craft of this is that you have to call on creativity not just when the spirit moves, but
Mm,
when the deadline, when the clock is ticking.
wow. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. That's great advice. I love asking this question, and there's no wrong answer. But the three levels of influence: money, power, and respect. And if you could choose one of those things, which one would you choose and why?
Ooh. That's actually a tough one, and I'll be honest with it because money gives us choices, right? It doesn't buy.
Yes.
I will, and then power or maybe influence. That's a difficult one too because again, we all want the ability to change something if we feel stuck about something. I have to say you say there's no right answer, but honestly, there's no wrong answer. I mean, I will say that oftentimes my goal is to be respected by my peers, the people
Mm,
who do this as well and know what it takes and know the battles and know the hills that we have to choose to die on or, to live another day. And the way that, you think lives were at stake sometimes, they're not. But I mean, the way that we can question ourselves as human beings, which is
mm,
sounds really, really dramatic, but we are in the business of drama. So
yes.
I would say that, having the respect of those people that do the same thing as I do, especially from my peers, from my colleagues, from my compatriots, I feel like that is probably the biggest thing because, you can't take anything with you in this life and you
Oh,
can't
yes.
take power and you can't take the money. But I think it was this is so heady, but I'm gonna be indulgent for a minute. I
I
think
love
it
it.
I think it was Bruce Lee. It was saying, that the key to immortality is to live a life that's worth remembering.
Mm,
I feel like when I think about that, not nobody wants to actually live forever. I wouldn't, but
yeah.
when you go, people aren't going to remember. It's not going to be written on your tombstone. you
Yeah.
know, had a ton of money, was rich AF. Like no one's going to remember that.
Yeah.
Wow, this person, their legacy, what they're leaving, what they're remembering,
Hmm.
how you want to remember that person. Or even just, wow, that person walked into the room.
Yeah.
Oh, they look rich. It's like, wow, wow, they look powerful. Wow. Oh my gosh, that person has
Mhm.
done that thing and I really respect them. I think that's the goal. And by the way, thank you for that question because just
Yeah.
talking through it, I'm like, that's the most important thing to remember, I think, is living in a way, conducting my business in a way that is respected and
Yeah.
respectable.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's a great, great answer. Probably I've asked this question many times, and I think
I still
I was just
want
like,
money, by
yes,
the way. I still want money and power.
1000%. I mean, you have to have it in this business, it's necessary, and especially living in California. It's you gotta have it. Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's what makes the business and businesses like this, professions like this, so difficult because we're
Hmm.
on a movie or a TV show, we're one of the only crafts. I don't want to boast that we're the only, but we're certainly one of the only crafts that requires us to provide all of our own materials to
Yeah.
to do our job. A costume designer isn't asked to bring their yards and bolts of fabric, and they're supplied or they were given a budget. We have so it is an expensive industry, and there has to be money. It's a pay to play. There
Yeah.
has to be money to make money. So, but I
Yeah.
think we're all like that too. To
For sure. I love that. Really quick. Oh man, 30 minutes is going that fast. Um, any advice for that young kid or young boy that or girl that wants to, try and get into be a composer one day? What would you tell them?
I would say, first of all, do it. Like whatever you're at, whatever the easiest path forward is to do it, like try for it. So if that means
Yeah.
talking to somebody, going to school for it. I am a big proponent for educating oneself. It doesn't have to be formal education like I did. There's lots of incredibly talented and successful people that kind of fell into it. I
Yeah.
hate I love them. I'm just saying it's like, oh, but it doesn't have to be, formal education. But I will say the more you can educate yourself in whatever capacity,
Better.
through experience or mentorship, or
Yeah.
formal training, is the best. I think it's so good. It's more tools in your toolbox. But don't. I would say there's is a very is a good balance between confidence and humility, so you
Mm.
want to show up. There's a little sound bite like show up and shut up, like, I mean, show up, but and listen, listen and try and learn from others around you. But don't be afraid to explore and push boundaries, because it is an
Mm.
art. It is a craft as well. It's actually not often even times about as much as about the music as it is about all the other parts of the aspects of it. But
Hmm.
it does start with the music. It really does start with your product and your brand. So I would say you know um, do what you're feeling. Like start with what moves you. Study what you're inspired by, and
Yeah.
start from there. And there's room for everybody, and there really is, and the industry is big, and it's growing, and it's just all are welcome, no matter what you feel or what you hear. All are really welcome.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on. This was really refreshing.
You know what? And I really appreciate your questions, and it helps me reflect and remind myself of the why I got into this and why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
So also very refreshing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Where can people find you on social media?
Instagram at Sherri Chung. Not really on Twitter, but I mean I kind of am, but it would be at Sherri_Chung.
Nice. All
iTunes,
right.
Spotify.
Yeah. Everywhere. Just Google. Just thank you again. It was a pleasure. Definitely come back again. This was fun for me today.
Love
Um
to. Thank you so much.
thank you. And thank you all for listening. And always remember to live, love, laugh. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.